This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Thousands clash with police in Sudanese cities, protesting against the Prime Minister's deal with the military.
We need to use the measures that we know, and we need to use the measures that we know that work.
The WHO encourages vigilance as some vaccine manufacturers express fears that current jabs may not work against the Omicron variant. And Uganda announces joint strikes against the DRC's ADF rebels, but the DRC denies the presence of Ugandan troops. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. And with me is Uche Okoronkwo with a preview of your business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni lauds the construction of the East African crude oil pipeline as key to the region's integration. And Senegalese President Macky Sall adds on to calls opposing the end of financing for fossil fuel extraction. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Now we start today's program in Sudan, where security forces on Tuesday deployed tear gas on tens of thousands of protesters who gathered in the capital Khartoum to oppose military rule. Bridges linking the capital's sister cities were left open, but heavily armed police took to central Khartoum, where protesters planned to march on the presidential palace. Neighborhood resistance committees called for the protests despite an agreement that reinstated civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok last week. The committees and political parties in Sudan are opposed to a deal struck between Hamdok and the military. Hamdok has, however, assured the deal will realize the release of dozens of detainees, end a crackdown on protesters that has seen 42 people killed, according to medics, and preserve billions in foreign aid. Some of the freed political detainees were seen at the protests. The protesters have been marching regularly in the capital and other cities since the October 25th military takeover. Now, the Ugandan army says it's launched joint air and artillery strikes with Congolese forces against rebels in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The attack against camps of the Allied Democratic Forces comes 2 weeks after twin bomb blasts rocked the Ugandan capital, Kampala. Here's CGTN's Chris Ochamringa with more from Kinshasa.
The joint military operations against the Allied Democratic Forces militia by the Congolese and Ugandan army was first reported about by foreign media on Sunday. The journalists quoted a senior Congolese official as saying that the DRC president had authorized the Ugandan army to enter its territory. The news sparked an uproar among some Congolese citizens who are against the entry of troops from neighboring countries like Uganda and Rwanda. But the DRC army denied the presence of Ugandan troops in its territory.
There are no Ugandan troops on Congolese soil. We are only sharing intelligence information with them about the whereabouts of our common enemy, the ADF rebels.
The report of a joint air and artillery strike in eastern DRC was tweeted by the Ugandan army spokesperson just a day after the remarks by her Congolese counterpart. The onslaught was confirmed by the DRC government spokesperson, Patrick Muyaya. Soldiers of the Uganda People's Defense Forces will support the Congolese army to fight against the Allied Democratic Forces in eastern DRC. The ADF is an Islamist militia that has been operating in eastern DRC since the mid-1990s. It's originally from neighboring Uganda. The Ugandan government accuses the ADF of carrying out 2 suicide bombings in the capital Kampala earlier this month. The militant group has been accused of killing hundreds of civilians in Ituri and North Kivu province since the beginning of this year. The east of the DRC is a mineral-rich region that has been rocked by conflict for over 2 decades. The UN estimates there are 120 armed groups operating there. Many of them are fighting over land, ethnic rivalries, and the control of minerals. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, let's return to our top story for a moment, that of the political unrest in Sudan. We know, of course, that today protests continued in the streets of Khartoum and other cities as protesters continue demanding that military rule be ended in the country. Previously, protests have resulted in some deaths. Let's find out now how things progressed today. We are joined by our correspondent, Naba Mohudin, on the line for us from Khartoum. Naba, tell us what happened with protests today. Did authorities react calmly? Did everything proceed as calmly as possible?
The protest started at 11G, and protesters gathered around the capital, but the main point was Al Arabi Market, which is less than 1 kilometer from the palace, the presidential palace. Thousands of people rallied, and they had slogans and signs saying no negotiation, no compromise, and no legitimacy for the military, especially after Hamdok signed the political pact with the military. People crawled heading to the presidential palace, but the military and security and police fired tear gas, sound bombs, and live ammunition to disperse people. The protest continued for 4 hours, and the authorities used excessive violence by beating the protesters, by firing tear gas and sound bombs, and targeting different parts of protesters' bodies. And there is reported casualties by doctors' committee. People were injured in their faces and hands, and some people lost their hands. The protesters gathered around the presidential palace, but they didn't reach the palace because of the tear gas and excessive use of violence, and they started a sit-in. They said they won't leave till they see Hamdok ousted and the military also ousted from the political scene, but the security forces dispersed them by using more tear gas and live ammunition. And there was a report saying that they are surrounding the protesters in some of the hospitals in Al Arabi Market. The injured people and their families, they are surrounding them, and there is reports of arresting some of protest leaders. Also, the protest saw some of the ousted government members rallying in the streets with protesters. It was big, and the security reacted in a very, very aggressive way. And there is call for more protests heading to the presidential palace in the following days.
Well, certainly a very tense situation on the ground. Thank you so much for that update. Naba Mohudin on the phone from Khartoum. Now to our coverage of the coronavirus pandemic. As countries around the world race to try and prevent the spread of the new Omicron virus variant, the World Health Organization once again urged caution on Tuesday with a reminder of the available precautions that should be used to stop the virus from spreading further. The WHO spoke in Geneva as the head of drug maker Moderna said COVID-19 vaccines are unlikely to be as effective against the Omicron variant, sparking fresh worry in financial markets about the trajectory of the pandemic.
As we don't have any full picture of this variant, as long as we don't know how well or not well the existing vaccines are working, how the treatment is catching up, how transmissible it is, how severe it attacks people, we need to use the measures that we know, and we need to use the measures that we know that work. And that is, as Rial just shows you in the picture, the mask wearing whenever possible and advisable, as long as you're in a room with more than one person, ventilating a room if possible as often as possible, keeping the normal hand and body hygiene, especially hand and mouth hygiene in those circumstances. So we know these measures work.
Well, let's bring in Dr. Angelique Coetzee for more on this story. She is the chairperson of the South African Medical Association. Doctor, thank you so much for your time this evening. Now, the world is still scrambling to understand this new COVID variant known as Omicron. Just tell us how it's presenting in patients in hospitals where you are.
Good evening. Yeah, it's a very interesting question that you're asking. So we're not working predominantly in hospitals. We are working at primary care level at our own surgeries. We've got a different system in South Africa. So what we are seeing is at this stage mild cases presenting with mild symptoms. So it's a fatigue, and it's a sort of a scratch in the throat that some patients will complain about, as well as mild body aches and pains with a headache. So what we call malaise. So it's not really something very spectacular that they will come in. I have seen only 2 patients. One was a child who had a severe temperature and a high pulse rate, but the rest of the patients are really very mild. And even that child, after we have started, I don't know whether it was a Tamiflu that we had put her on, or whether it was, she would in any case have got better without medication, that I can't say. But in any case, she within 48 hours since after she has been with me, she improved dramatically. And so yes, we do see patients with breakthrough infections that had been vaccinated. But again, it's a small number that we are currently seeing. I think I have, I'm now trying to do my stats on this. So far about 8 patients with breakthrough infections, again, mild disease, and not really any significant clinical symptoms. That's what we see now. In the hospital, you will see a different picture, because in hospitals in South Africa, you will normally be admitted and you won't go there for just normal treatment.
Right.
And it is important just to understand that the case load in the hospitals in the private sector at this stage is about 1 to 2 patients per day. We do, however, expect going forward that there will be an increase. How fast spreading this virus is, I think it's quite fast spreading. It can be on par with Delta or even faster than Delta. But for now, the majority that we are seeing is really, really mild cases.
Well, that is
with that, we're not
certainly...
saying...
Yes, Doctor, I mean, of course, it is comforting to hear that a lot of the cases are mild at this point. But talking about immunity, we've heard drug maker Moderna raise concerns that some of the vaccines might not be effective against this variant. Can you comment on that, and also the possibility that someone who has previously had COVID might have developed some level of resistance to this new variant?
Still, it's very early days, and I think going forward we will have a much clearer picture on that. I cannot comment on Moderna because in South Africa we only use Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer. What I do, however, can say is that the majority of those 8 cases that I have seen with breakthrough infections was Pfizer. And they had their last injection July, August this year. So it fits in with the picture where Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer is saying that they need to get a booster after their 2 shots. So that fits in. We are now also in South Africa going to start with Johnson & Johnson with the second booster shot, or actually Johnson & Johnson should be a 2-dose regime as well, but we will call it a booster shot. So I had 1 patient with a breakthrough infection on Johnson & Johnson so far. Again, mild disease.
Okay. And Dr. Coetzee, you are credited as being among the doctors that first raised the alarm about this new variant. What is your feeling about how the world has responded to it over the past few days?
Look, it is astonishing what happened within less than 24 hours to South Africa. We were still trying to, our scientists were still trying to go out there and say, listen, there's a variant. Yes, it is of concern. It's got a lot of mutations. We don't know what's going to happen. It might be bad. It might not be. We don't know. We only will have data available in 2 weeks from now on. And then the next moment you've been slammed with total bans from other countries, so the economic impact of that on our country is tremendous, and then the emotional impact on patients or citizens wanting to go and visit family or relatives in other countries, or the same vice versa. It is just a tremendous negative effect, and we feel that at this stage it would have been much more prudent for these countries instead of slamming South Africa or closing the doors on South Africa, just to start in their own countries with first compulsory mask wearing, social distancing, you know, that non-pharmaceutical interventions that we keep on talking about, that they should have started with that first. And again, you know, in the first world countries, we know that they are looking at their booster shots and get their people you know, give them their booster shots. The people that's vulnerable and above 50s or 60s, whatever the policy of that country is. But, you know, I also do understand that countries say they want to protect their people. But, you know, with this, so the trick is that if the virus is presenting in the early stages with these mild type of symptoms, a patient can easily, as I've said, they're not really that ill. They're not feeling great, but they're not severely ill that they need to stay in bed or go to a hospital to be admitted. So they will travel because to them, in their mind, it's not something that's serious, and they will spread the virus. So, you know, I think we will see a lot if other countries are honest and they now start to test after we have now raised the alarm and say, please test. And also asking patients, please go and see your general practitioners. If you have these type of mild symptoms, go and see, ask to be tested. Hopefully they will see that they already have this variant in their country.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights. Dr. Angelique Coetzee, the chairperson of the South African Medical Association. All right, let's now go to Senegal, where bilateral talks and deliberations have been going on for the better part of the afternoon on day 2 of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. The 8th FOCAC Ministerial Conference looks to find ways to further deepen cooperation between China and Africa. Well, let's bring you the very latest now. Our reporter Nick Madumba is in Dakar. Nick, tell us, what is the latest from today's events at the Forum?
Thank you very much, Lindy. So officially, the Forum has actually come to an end through the press conference held by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his counterpart Aissata Tall, and very strong declaration, very strong ending in favor of Africa. And of course, yesterday, President Xi Jinping came up with very, very strong statements about how China will come in through for Africa. And this is something that indeed has been cemented in the press conference. So some of those things that actually have been mentioned by Foreign Minister Wang Yi is that they will continue working together with Africa, and of course, upholding equity and justice and core in aid for Africa. Interference of internal issue of countries is something China is against of, and this has been cemented big time during the press conference, and the Foreign Minister Wang Yi insisted that this won't be part of their portion. Also, China appreciates Africa supporting President Xi Jinping's agenda of the continent. Just yesterday, we saw that so much has been offered for China. Pledges 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine, trade, embargoes and red tapes actually put down. And of course, SMEs, LCDs, all those things actually will be sorted out. And according to the Foreign Minister Wang Yi, all these will actually start being executed immediately.
Fantastic. Well, Nick, tell us though, what are some of the biggest takeaways from the African nations represented at the Forum?
Absolutely. So, Lindy, the takeaways are so many, and the press conference cemented all that was mentioned yesterday by President Xi Jinping. And this is just among the things that was mentioned. As I told you earlier, is that many of these promises and pledges by China will come to fruition immediately after this conference, because when you talk about trade, agriculture, which is a food basket of Africa, will actually be executed immediately. Now, something else is that African nations will benefit big time through the medical assistance from China. The COVID-19 pandemic has really destabilized so many African nations. Healthcare system very fragile, Lindy, but this time round, Foreign Minister Wang Yi has actually promised that China will even be stronger to come in and help Africa just uphold its healthcare system. Also, Lindy, is that the trade between China and African countries will keep on soaring high. And this is among those things that have been mentioned during the press conference. And of course, Issa Sall Tall, who is the foreign minister of Senegal, insisted that China has been very, very conspicuous, very, very vocal about helping Africa just realize that indeed with the putting heads together, the aspect of togetherness, working as a unit, will actually steer the continent to the next level, Lindy.
Well, thank you so much, Nick Mudimba, joining us there live from Dakar. Now, African leaders have been reacting to that speech given by Chinese President Xi Jinping. He addressed the participants on Monday via video link. Let's listen in.
You know, Tanzania and China have long-standing relations, that we have historical bonds that go many years back. So it was important that we meet to reiterate our long-established friendship and to assure him that Tanzania, under the new government of Her Excellency President Samia Suluhu Hassan, is committed to strengthen and deepen further our friendship that has existed between our two countries. But then I also use this opportunity to congratulate him, and of course through him the government of the People's Republic of China and the government of Senegal for organizing this 8th ministerial conference.
We asked our partner China to help us transform our raw materials in Côte d'Ivoire. Côte d'Ivoire is the leading producer of cocoa, mahogany nuts, the third largest producer of coffee, and the country produces cotton as well. Côte d'Ivoire has many agricultural products, fruits, vegetables, and we want all these products to be processed in Côte d'Ivoire to bring added value. But above all, this will create jobs for our youth, our women, and allow our farmers to have a substantial income.
We have been saying that China supports the Central African Republic in various areas, namely energy development, agricultural development, and in certain training programs that it offers to the Central African population. This is a partnership that is intended to be mutually beneficial, and this is what is happening between our two countries.
La déclaration aujourd'hui du président Xi Jinping est une déclaration historique.
President Xi Jinping's statement today is historic. He mentioned some commitments that need to be highlighted. He pledged to give African countries 1 billion vaccines, which is extremely interesting, especially in this time of pandemic. Personally, I can say that my country has received 1.5 million vaccines from our Chinese friends, and they are promising more. Currently, we are at 25% of people vaccinated, and we intend to go further. And our Chinese friends have been the most generous with us so far.
As you know, the top priority for Burkina Faso today is security. In this regard, we have pleaded with the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs to support Burkina Faso in managing the security challenges, which are now very important and urgent. Since 2018, a donation of military equipment has been promised to us. We hope that the delivery will be accelerated. In addition, within the framework of the G5 Sahel, it was planned to support the G5 Sahel states in general, but also the states individually.
You're watching Africa Live, coming up after the break. Ethiopia's Prime Minister speaks from the front lines again, saying the battle against the TPLF will be finished in no time.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tense here. Bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
the front line. Within clear view of this front line position.
Once the lockdown happened, all the gyms were instructed to shut down.
Nobody could have foreseen what COVID-19 brought with it. Businesses were not prepared.
technology had to really play a big part. We had to think of being able to social distance with your client, but still be able to train them. Let's go. Let's go.
We're going to go to what people call the new normal, and it will never be the same as what it was before.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has spoken from the front lines again. He says government forces will finish their job in no time, fighting against Tigrayan rebels. He has called on those fighting alongside the TPLF to surrender before it's too late. So far, state media is reporting that Ethiopia's army has retaken the town of Chifra in the Afar region. This after Abiy headed to the war front last week. Abiy's government has been fighting against forces from Tigray for more than a year now.
To finish the job of recapturing Gashena and repeat our victory in the Eastern Front, we have finished planning and our troops are ready. We will soon meet on the other side. My message to the enemy is, many of you have entered an area and landscape that you are unaware of, with no plan and preparation. Tigray's youth is falling like a leaf off of a tree due to this offensive. So, knowing that they are defeated, we call on them to surrender and put down the arms. They are inside an unplanned, no destination and no rescue on site mission. So, we ask them to surrender to the National Defense Forces, for Special Forces and the militia or the people and spare their lives.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has called on citizens to take advantage of a vaccine rollout campaign. The East African country hopes to vaccinate at least 10% of its 47 million population by the end of the year.
While a few battles have been won, the war against COVID is not yet won. And we cannot rest on our laurels. Now more than ever, we are faced with yet another variant of this coronavirus, the Omicron variant that is said to carry a higher risk of infection. This variant may explain infection rate spikes that we are witnessing across the globe. To fortify our national resolve against COVID-19, and in honor of all those Kenyans that we have lost to the disease, I do urge today all Kenyan adults to visit their nearest medical facility to receive their COVID-19 vaccinations.
In South Africa, the Western Cape Health Department has signed bilateral agreements with the 4 universities in the province to reform healthcare services and ensure they are more people-centered. The department and universities have all backed President Cyril Ramaphosa's call urging South Africans to get vaccinated as the country deals with a new COVID-19 variant. Here's Renadel Khan with more.
The 4 leading institutions of higher learning in the Western Cape, that is the University of Cape Town, the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, Stellenbosch University and the University of the Western Cape, already run an innovative public healthcare system with globally recognized medical experts. These partnerships are crucial if health agencies and officials are to achieve some of their targets in fighting COVID-19. The Western Cape Health Department and the university top brass in the province agree that they are stronger together. They're collectively committed to deliver optimal healthcare to the people of the Western Cape province as they continue to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. The universities have all supported President Cyril Ramaphosa's call urging everyone in South Africa to get vaccinated. They've also announced that they plan to implement vaccine mandates on their campuses.
For us as at UCT, we are keen for our students to come back to face-to-face teaching. And the reason for that is that we want to offer what we promise, quality education. And so in considering our academic year 2022, we decided that we should go with mandatory vaccination.
We have what we call a soft exclusion and a hard exclusion. The soft exclusion is basically that all students can register, but if you need to access any of the university premises, you need to show your proof of vaccination. We also had what we call a hard exclusion, and those are specifically focused on our health sciences students. And to minimize the risk, we are saying that students, you need to be vaccinated if you need to, before you register.
In his latest address to the nation, President Cyril Ramaphosa said vaccines were the most powerful tools against COVID-19 and the new Omicron variant, and he said his government was considering enforcing vaccine mandates.
We do realize that the introduction of such a measure is a difficult and complex issue. But if we do not address this seriously and as a matter of urgency, we will continue to be vulnerable to new variants and will continue to suffer new waves of infection.
Experts say if COVID-19 cases continue to climb, the country could enter its fourth wave of infections within the next 4 weeks. Renee Delcam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And let's now go to Uche for your latest business news.
Thanks, Lindy. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni lauds the construction of the East African crude oil pipeline as key to the region's integration.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in Uganda, where President Yoweri Museveni says the construction of the East African crude oil pipeline will strengthen the East African region's political and economic integration. Now, the statement was made during a 3-day visit to Tanzania, where he attended an oil and gas symposium and held bilateral talks with his Tanzanian counterpart, Samia Suluhu Hassan. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lukando with more.
Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni touched down in Tanzania to a warm reception and attended an oil and gas symposium. High on the agenda were efforts to maximize the benefits of a $3.5 billion oil pipeline connecting Uganda's oil fields to Tanzania's port of Tanga. Preliminary agreements for the construction of the 1,445-kilometer pipeline were signed in April this year. President Museveni believes high-value projects like this one hold the key to a prosperous East Africa.
East Africa has got everything: agriculture, minerals, forests, oil, gas, etc. Once the environmental concerns are addressed, the sky is the limit.
Tanzanian exports to Uganda have surged this year. In June, they were 43% higher than the year before, increasing concerns of a trade imbalance between the two nations. In addition to the oil pipeline, President Samia Suluhu Hassan says she wants to see more trade between the two countries.
We ought to talk about investments in other areas in order to complement the oil business. In terms of investment, Tanzania and Uganda have made strides, but we are in agreement that we've not done well enough and that more efforts are needed.
The oil pipeline project is expected to see an increase of more than 60% in foreign direct investment to both Uganda and Tanzania during the construction phase alone. It is expected to create some 5,000 jobs directly and 20,000 others indirectly. The East African oil pipeline project has attracted growing criticism over the last 2 years, with some arguing that the project carries significant environmental and social risks. However, leaders of the two countries maintain that the project is not only sound, but also has extensive benefits for their people. To boost trade between the two nations, Tanzania says it will now buy sugar from Uganda. The government says access to work permits has also been simplified to accelerate cross-border investments.
Our existing borders were set by colonialists for administration purposes. We are now redefining them through oil and gas pipelines, electricity, and even industries. These are the new frontiers. Business people should therefore be free to move between our two countries.
Oil from Uganda is expected to begin flowing through the pipeline into Tanzania in 2025. Leaders of both nations hope that when that happens, their citizens will be able to reap the benefits. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Meanwhile, Africa's biggest oil producer, Nigeria, is eyeing increased earnings from the export of crude. The country is still heavily reliant on oil exports to drive its economy and now hopes that a rise in prices will deliver much-needed revenue. Here's CGTN's Deji Bademosi with more.
Nigeria projects to produce 1.88 million barrels of oil per day to fund its budget next year. The emerging global energy crunch could therefore mean the country may not only benefit from a likely increased demand for its oil, but also higher prices. For a country that is battling severe revenue challenge and scarcity of foreign exchange, the global energy crunch could provide it with some respite.
In terms of revenues for Nigeria, in terms of forex, in terms of GDP and all that, that is a welcome development. Whether that will now translate into a better lifestyle for Nigerians is a totally different thing entirely itself. So that will now be dependent on the internal economics and how things are managed in the local space.
In the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, Nigeria saw demand for its oil almost ground to a halt, throwing its economy into a recession. Things have since picked up as both demand and price of crude oil are on the rise. Despite being a net exporter of crude, virtually all of the refined petroleum products used in Nigeria are imported. The country spends as much as 30% of its forex earnings on refined petroleum product imports, eroding a substantial part of its earnings from crude. The government is now banking on the 650,000 barrels per day Dangote refinery in Lagos to bail the country out. The refinery is expected to begin operation next July.
And we think that that is going to be a major saver for foreign exchange for our country, and we think we will export those refined products. If you look at the cost of freight alone is a major saving for Nigeria. If we have to go to Europe or other part of the world to bring in petroleum products, where we pay heavily in freight, we will pay heavily even in stocking those products in the high seas before we offload them.
Nigeria has abundance of gas resources, but it imports as much as 80% of the gas used in the country. With gas prices skyrocketing globally, the price is also increasing in the country. Cooking gas merchant Joseph Utomi has seen his sales drop drastically as the cost of gas is beyond the reach of many of his customers.
Actually, because of this increase, people have decided to shift to the other measures, like charcoal. So if you don't have money to buy gas, you will choose buy charcoal of 200 naira, buy charcoal of 150 naira.
LPG is subject to the same forces of demand and supply that petrol, diesel, and kerosene are subjected to. So in simple terms, the falling price of value of the naira and the fact that it is imported and the inflation prices are what is affecting LPG. And there's little anyone can do about it except they start to subsidize. So the solution on the long term is that we start to produce more LPG and meet our local demand.
Without a concrete and decisive move towards producing much of the energy it consumes at home, the gains from higher energy costs globally will continue to elude Nigeria. Like previous governments, the current government of the country says it is determined to address the issue. But that has not yet happened. Deji Bademosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, the African Development Bank has postponed to an unspecified date its investment forum that was due to start in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire on Wednesday. Bank President Akiwumi Adesina announced on Monday that the decision was a result of health concerns and travel restrictions due to the Omicron coronavirus variant. Now, several heads of state, including from South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Tanzania, Rwanda and Mozambique, were expected to attend. Also expected was a delegation from the United States that included investors representing more than $1.6 trillion in assets under management. Now, the event was to run from December 1st to 3rd. The AFDB said the forum had 118 deals in its pipeline from all 8 founding members, with an investment value of over $110 billion. Now, Adesina also said conversations around the funding of projects will continue behind the scenes. And Ugandans are concerned about the rising cost of living due to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Prices of essential commodities such as fuel and foodstuffs have shot up, forcing some people to cut their expenditure. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Michael Kanyesije deals in fresh foodstuff. He's concerned about the increasing cost of doing business.
Business currently it has actually gone down. We no longer sell like we used to sell. I think these are some of the impacts of the coronavirus. Because most of our customers no longer pass here, they have changed their routes.
Consumers say they are living on a shoestring budget because they cannot afford some items.
The bananas I used to buy cheaply are now expensive. The trader says she has increased the price to meet her costs.
Some people are doing away with certain items. They decide to have one meal a day. They forego tea because of the increase of price of the sugar.
Research by the Federation of Small and Medium Enterprises shows that most of the small businesses are struggling to stay afloat.
In that research, we found that 68% of businesses were having cash flow challenges. We found that 22% of businesses had to sell off household assets during the lockdown. We found that about 36% were at risk of closure if they're not helped.
The rise in fuel prices has also exacerbated the problem. A litre of petrol at this fuel station costs $1.25 and diesel about $1.15. This is 20 cents higher than in April this year. Experts blame the rising cost of living on the prolonged pandemic-induced shutdown to curb infections. The government is now proposing a new strategy for economic recovery.
So our strategy is a 3-tier strategy now, and we have been highlighting it before. Number one, we are working on reopening the economy fully, and this is mainly relying on vaccination.
With more vaccines moving in, the government hopes by the end of January next year, they will have vaccinated about 22 million Ugandans. But in the meantime, traders like Kanyesije say they will have to pass on the rising costs to the final consumer. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And heading to Tunisia now, the country has launched a program to fund projects in its farming sector in order to help reinforce the country's agricultural production and also boost food security. Here's Adnan Shauchi reporting.
Many young Tunisians are benefiting from a state-backed program to support responsible investment in agriculture. The objective of this initiative is to develop responsible agricultural investments and strengthen the role of young people in Tunisia's agricultural sector.
Tunisia has a well-developed legal and institutional framework to boost investment in the agricultural sector. However, young people are reluctant to invest in this vital economic sector, which guarantees food security. Our objective is to determine and solve the problems which slow down responsible investments in agriculture by offering state incentives.
The program was launched in collaboration with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. FAO program manager in Tunis explains that these projects were selected because they met a number of criteria, including employability and social and environmental impact.
We've trained the participants in this program. Now they know the importance of responsible investments in agriculture and territorial anchoring. This approach creates added value in their regions, as well as new job opportunities. The program valorizes the agricultural resources throughout Tunisia.
International experts stress the need to initiate reforms of the laws relating to investment and access of young people to financing in the agricultural sector.
We are working with Tunisian authorities on a collective vision which places youth at the center of the agricultural investment project. We aim to reinforce the coordination between the agencies supporting young investors to reinforce access to financing as well as access to information and communication.
The pilot agricultural program has targeted the northwestern region of Beja and the livestock and olive oil subsectors. Similar projects will be launched in other regions in the North African state. The latest figures released by the Agricultural Investment Promotion Agency and the Agriculture Department show that some 2,500 agricultural investment operations were approved in the first 10 months of 2021 for a total of $135 million, posting an 18.4% rise compared to the same period in 2020. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And that is all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll have the latest from the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation that has just concluded in Dakar, Senegal. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour for now. Back to Lindy.
Thanks, Uche. Well, your sports news coming up after this short break. Former disgraced South African athlete Oscar Pistorius set to meet his victims' parents.